and welcome to the Merryman House Domestic Crisis Center program, where we talk about the Merryman House's work in saving, building, and changing lives. The issue of domestic violence is far-reaching and it is broad in its effects. And one of the things that we rarely get an opportunity to talk with you about is the role of economics, of financial issues in the intersection with domestic violence. It is believed that financial obstacles are perhaps the number one reason why individuals are unable to leave abusive relationships. And so here to talk more about that is a very special guest who came to us from Frankfurt just to share this time together. I'd like to welcome Mary O'Doherty, the Assistant Director for the Kentucky Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and specifically the leader in the Economic Empowerment Project. So
thank you for having me.
A mouthful, but thank you for coming. So you really have become, from my perspective, and I think many would agree, maybe the voice in the wilderness, if you would, about economics, and the need to empower survivors to remove that barrier. And you really have been heralded as one of the most creative and passionate advocates around this issue. And frankly, your work and your resume and your successes around this are they're unbelievable. So I very much appreciate you being here, because I don't think the western end of the state gets to see somebody like you as often as we probably should. And so tell me, why is the issue of economic empowerment and domestic violence, why is that so important to you? And tell me what has brought you to this particular place in your career where this is really what you eat and breathe all the time.
Well, first of all, I have to say thank you for that very lovely introduction. That was very kind. I started working in the domestic violence field about 13 years ago, and I was hired by our state coalition to develop an economic empowerment project. The idea came from a road trip that my boss took, where she went to visit each of the executive directors of our 15 programs across the state. And she was asking them, what do we need to be focusing our energies on? How should we move this issue forward and move our work forward? And the answer was resoundingly, you need to focus on economic empowerment. You need to help the survivors who are in our shelters or who are getting help from us non-residentially move on and out of these abusive relationships. Financial empowerment was thought to be the key, and I think the issue that really underscored this was the executive directors were just tired of seeing the children and grandchildren of women that they had served.
So that was sort of a revolving door kind of generational cycle piece.
Yes,
okay.
And I think it was very frustrating to them, and that is indeed how we got to this point.
So just for viewers that may not be as intimately acquainted with the language, when you say economic empowerment, what does that look like? What is that?
With our project, it looks like financial education classes.
Okay.
It looks like credit counseling. It's basically helping survivors get a grip, get a handle on where they are, what their financial situation is. Mary, you know how economic abuse is a pretty frequent issue that survivors deal with. Very often they're in relationships with very controlling people. Many of the women that we work with didn't know what the household budget was, didn't know how much money was coming in, didn't have access to the family's checking account, didn't have experience with banking, with basic banking services.
And are often not permitted to work. Not like it's a mutual decision between the two. They're literally not permitted to work or to develop skill sets that would enable them to have the knowledge that you're talking about.
So in the extreme cases, we're actually helping women understand how banking systems work, why it's important to have a checking account, and today, of course, why it's important to have a debit card. We're helping them understand really basic financial education concepts, budgeting, we call them spending leaks, how money that your spending habits might have leaks in them, where you're spending more money than you realized, maybe on coffee at Starbucks or restaurant meals, that kind of thing. So we also deal with credit scores. We pull credit reports for every one who wants them, and we'll give survivors their credit scores. And it's very interesting. Very often they don't want to know what their credit scores are. They say, "Oh, it's going to be so awful. I don't want to know. There's no need." And we very often find out that it's not as bad as they think it is.
So the Economic Empowerment Project was born that way, and over these 10 years, how has it grown? How has it changed? And what is your experience here on the western end of the state?
We started with a pretty, admittedly narrow focus. We started with a matched savings program called Individual Development Accounts, and we got a federal grant that enabled us to offer these matched savings accounts for survivors who participated in financial education classes and that kind of thing. Well, after about a year, our member programs told us, these are nice, but they're a little too ambitious for most of our survivors. So while the program was working, it was really only working for a select number of women served at the shelters, and that wasn't good. We wanted to be relevant to a much bigger swath. So we expanded our services. We now offer another individual development account. It's a CAR, individual development account, and survivors who save $2,000 of their own funds receive $2,000 in match funds, so they have $4,000 to buy a car with. We also added a microloan program. For so many of the women in our programs, predatory lenders are a real problem. When you're low income, an extra $200 can solve a really big problem. An extra $150 can get you from one payday to the next. Too many of our survivors routinely use payday lenders and get caught in a payday lending cycle. So to address that, we started a microloan program. So women at our shelters and at our programs are able to apply for these no-interest loans. And the idea is that'll keep them from going to the payday lenders, but it will also help them build their credit scores, because my agency is set up to report their timely payments directly to the credit bureaus.
So in a situation like that, it does have a preventative and an intervening arm all at the same time. It does address the immediate financial need that we know we all, whether or not you're a survivor, right? We all get in a pinch. Sometimes we have more going out than we have coming in, but it also then equips them through education and support to address that issue if it's an ongoing chronic problem. But it sounds, though, then like it's accomplishing a much broader stroke that they may not even be thinking about, which is that credit score that you referenced earlier. So they take advantage of the microloan program. What else?
I think the biggest achievement we have is we help these survivors understand that they do have control over their finances and over their futures. We had a woman very recently tell us, I didn't think saving was possible. I just didn't think it was possible. Her family had a bad experience with banks. They didn't bank. They were unbanked, and just by removing some of the obstacles, by making it less threatening, she was able to engage with the banking system, open a bank account. To her, that was a tremendous accomplishment. Just to save a little bit of money every month, that gave her some sense of control over her future. One of the most important things we do is we offer emergency assistance to the folks who participate in our savings program, so that when something happens that might cause them to miss a payment, to miss a savings deposit, they can come to us and say, my car broke down, I'm not going to make my savings deposit this month. Well, if we can, and if the facts line up the way we hope they will, we might make that car repair for them, or we might pay that late utility bill for them, so they can stay on track. And that emergency fund is a great way to show the survivors that we really are in their corner. We really want them to succeed. And it really helps with the staff at the shelters because they see that we really want to help them help the survivors.
Well, and so many times, I want to be very careful to just honor the fact that, it's not just a late utility payment, or it's not just like you said, an extenuating circumstance that they couldn't control. I mean, that's what it shows up like. But when an individual has been through the trauma of domestic violence and has made the decision, for those that are able to flee and come to an emergency shelter, there are so many variables of homelessness and no access to medications, no access to a bank account or a debit card, or even sometimes important documents that would be necessary to rent an apartment or to open those accounts that we're talking about. So many times they come with depleted resources, even if they do possess the raw knowledge and skills to be able to do what you're asking them to do. So I do think for those that might be listening and watching, for them to know that there are going to be unexpected curveballs when you deal with, hit head on the issue of domestic violence and how it's affected your life and the life of your children. But there are people in your corner that are anticipating long before those curveballs and how to help navigate them to get them back on track. Do you find that that is true, that the people do take those steps to leave or to better themselves and then get hit unexpectedly, and that's almost enough to knock them out of the ball game from their perspective?
Oh, certainly. I mean, we have experiences with survivors who start working with us, who open accounts, and then come to us and say, I just can't do this right now. And we have in fact a policy or a procedure for working with those folks. We call it respite. They can take 6 months off. They can just leave their account there. They can stop saving for 6 months or however long they think is necessary, and then they can come back when life has stabilized a little bit. And we've also had survivors say, no, I have to leave. I need that money right now for something else, and but I'm going to come back. And they do. And I have to say, when we have survivors who stop, quit, and then come back a year later, it's so gratifying to see, because those women succeed. They finish. I mean, they just do it on their timetable.
So we only have just a few more minutes before the break, but is the car the only IDA that you can enroll in, or are there other options?
Two kinds of IDAs. One we call our classic program, enables you to save for a first home, a post-secondary education, or to start a small business. And then we have the CAR IDA program.
I see. So they've got some options to take them on that path. Okay, you stay right here and you be sure and come right back. Lots more exciting information on the issue of domestic violence and economic empowerment. We'll be right back.
The Merryman House Domestic Crisis Center has been saving, building, and changing the lives of domestic violence victims since 1978. Last year alone, the Merryman House provided life-saving services to more than 1,000 victims in the Purchase region.
This comprehensive advocacy and support program offers a host of services to assist survivors on their journey to healing, wholeness, and safety, which include 24-hour access to emergency protective orders, financial assistance and housing stabilization, a 24-hour crisis line and emergency shelter, advocacy and support services, and much more.
Take your place in the fight against domestic violence and join hands with the Merryman House today. You can visit their website at themerrymanhouse.org to learn more about how you can find help, get connected, or give back.
Call 1-800-575-2686 or go to merrymanhouse.org.
Hello and welcome back to the Merryman House program, where we are talking about the intersection of domestic violence and the solution of economic empowerment. And to the program, our guest, we'd like to welcome to the program today, Mary O'Doherty from the Kentucky Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And you are the assistant director there, and you lead the economic empowerment projects. So we've been spending the first half of the program, for those that are just tuning in, talking about what economic empowerment is. I want you to briefly summarize that and then take us into how many people do you serve in a year in this way?
Sure. Economic empowerment is about helping survivors become self-sufficient, economically self-sufficient, giving them a sense that they can control their financial destiny, so they know that they can leave an abusive relationship and make it on their own and make a better life for their kids. We serve about 2,500 participants a year.
And is that through the statewide?
That's statewide across the state, about 2,500. We've helped about 1,300 families develop individual savings plans, or just budgets, family budgets. We've pulled credit reports for more than 500 women a year, and we have helped so far throughout the totality of the program, 463 women purchase homes, fund a post-secondary education, start a small business, or buy a car with individual development accounts.
When you say that, do you sometimes, I just listen to those numbers and I think, that's phenomenal. And is this what you expected when you started 10 years ago?
When I started 10 years ago, I thought this would be easier to do than it is. So
Always the way it is.
That's always the way it is. But no, I'm really gratified by that number. We've been very successful at Merryman House, and I did want to mention that in the last 2-3 years, the Economic Empowerment Services at Merryman House have really done well. We've really built up some great capacity at Merryman House. Right now, we have 17 survivors who are participating in our Microloan Program. 12 survivors have individual development accounts, and so far 15 have made purchases. So that's a really good number, and it's because your agency has really committed to this issue and to this program.
Well, to that, about 2.5 years ago, going on 3 years ago now, just to provide a little context, the Merryman House Board of Directors, along with myself, sat down to really examine the mission, what we were designed to do, where we needed to continue, what the heartbeat, the pulse of the organization, but then where we needed to maybe communicate that a little bit better. And so for those viewers who've been with the Merryman House for almost 30 years, we used to say every home is safe home, and that's so true. But in that board meeting, what really began to come out, to your point, was really it's so much more. It's saving, building, and changing lives, because domestic violence puts lives at risk, it devastates lives, and it by its very nature requires some sort of change in direction if we're going to be able to save and build. And so I do think that there was this recommitment to the issue that we're charged to deal with, but not to just be reactive, but to begin as an organization to help survivors and staff think of proactive ways to rebuild and change lives. And you can't have that conversation, you can't really understand that conversation if you don't understand it from an economic empowering place, which is where I think maybe that surge of recommitment to the fact that we can help them rebuild financially and change their lives in ways that maybe they never even dreamed, like going back to school, purchasing a home, what I'm saying there.
Yes.
So the Merryman House, our economic justice program is very strong, in my opinion. And you have seen firsthand some huge success stories out of that program. What would you say to everything you're hearing me say in terms of your own experience with the Merryman House and with the women who work in our program? I
would say the reason why I think the program works so well at Merryman House is that the staff who work on this issue don't wait. I mean, they start talking to women about financial matters and financial security in the shelter. I mean, you all are holding classes in the shelter for women who were there, who've just come out of emergency situations, but they're already in there talking to them about these issues at that early moment. And then they're working with women to become economically self-sufficient. Housing is a huge issue for survivors of domestic violence, and Merryman House has a very strong housing program. You have 20 units of housing, 12 in Paducah, 8 in Murray, that you control, and you've lined up housing assistance, rental assistance for those units. So when women, there's a place for women to transition to out of shelter. So I think that's a really important factor of why things work. And, and in addition to that, you also have other slots that are not, women who are provided housing in the community outside of those 20 units that we're talking about.
And there's an active effort to develop relationships with landlords who understand many of the obstacles that our women, and not just women, and we serve men as well, but primarily women face. And I do want to applaud them, right? When we take that call with them and explain, we have some landlords that have been so sensitive to the needs of our individuals.
Yes, and you've done. I mean, Merryman House has done a great job tapping funding sources, getting federal funding grants to help pay for rental assistance, to help pay for the staff to case manage folks. And I think that it's working nicely together. You know, we've got folks in the housing programs, in the shelter, who are getting a pretty steady diet of information about these economic empowerment issues. They're also working with survivors who are from other countries, who speak Spanish. You have a staff member who is just has excellent connections in the Hispanic community here. I mean, I'm just amazed at the number of survivors who are immigrants who have gotten work or gotten help here or continue to get help here.
And I do think that is such an important point for us to at least acknowledge and sort of enhance a little bit, and that is those survivors that are coming with that limited English proficiency have so many barriers beyond what you would even your typical domestic violence survivor would have. I mean, just the additional barriers that come with that. And so to be able to hear, I think, the hope of yes, we can get you what you need or help you get what you need with places like the Catholic Charities out of Louisville, and just different, making sure our materials are easily accessible to them and understood by them, and just really linking those survivors to the unique resources that they need that directly impact their economics and ability to become self-sufficient in those ways. And so I think for viewers that might be watching, I think that's really important. That language barrier doesn't have to be the barrier that keeps them from accessing services.
Well, I think that the Spanish-speaking, particularly survivors, I think Merryman House has sort of it's considered a trustworthy institution. You know, that you're not going to scam them.
Right.
You know, they know that, and they that's actually something that's been in place for quite a number of years.
Yes. So, you know, I know we have talked about. And I think we've even had on the program at one point one of the survivors that was able to purchase a home. What was that like, knowing that your project had a hand in those home purchases, and how life-changing that is for survivors that they have their own home to be with their own children? I mean, what is that like?
It's pretty wonderful. And you know, the woman that we're talking about, we've provided her photograph. It's a really good story about how we worked together with her, because she had lived in your housing for at least a couple of years, I believe, and was saving and was ready to purchase a home. And we require everyone who's getting ready to purchase a home, you know, we kind of get in there, we roll our sleeves up and get in there and look at the financials and make sure that the loan terms are good and that the home is a good purchase. And in this particular case, we discovered it wasn't. And we had to go to her and say, we can't endorse this purchase. We don't like the terms. We think you can do better.
Wow.
And to her credit, she said, you know, I appreciate that help. And we came back, I think it was a year later. She went back, she kept looking, and she found another house. She was able to get better terms from a bank. I think the first purchase might have been a contract kind of purchase, and we weren't pleased with those terms. But a year went by, her credit score got better. She was able to get a bank to work with her, and she got attractive terms, and she moved in. And I really love that story, because I think it shows that we were with her from the beginning to the end, and I love that she appreciated it.
Yes, I mean, so many times the position that we are in, it is our rightful place and job to say things that are unpopular and hard to hear sometimes. But boy, when we can come together and they are able to receive it and provide feedback to us, and we're able to provide feedback to them, it really does, in the long run, work out so much better. So the economic empowerment of services offered here at the Merryman House, as you have alluded to, are vast: housing stabilization, savings plans, financial literacy, education opportunities and classes. We also partner with folks like at Paducah Bank and area bankers and all state agents. Would you like to talk anything about that partnership and how that relates?
Yes, we have a terrific partnership with the Allstate Foundation. Our agency gets about $100,000 a year from the foundation to support our economic empowerment services. And one of the ways that we have used those funds is to build relationships with Allstate agents that provide financial education classes and one-on-one counseling at our shelters across the state. And I know that's happened at Merryman House. For the last couple of years. We've had several Allstate agents who've come in, taught classes, and helped survivors take a closer look at their financial situation.
Well, and it's so critical because, you know, Merryman House staff can't be all things to all people. We can't be financial experts and housing experts and all of those things. But boy, to see the community excitement when you have folks that are experts to come in and find their intersection to the issue. That really is, I think, one of the most wonderful parts of what we get to do every day, and that's link people together.
You know, one byproduct that I didn't anticipate is that the survivors really appreciate that these folks are giving of their time, and I think it's affirming for the survivors that someone's come in and wants to spend an hour with them, wants to talk to them about an issue that's pretty darn important.
Well, and I think long term, long after their relationship with the Merryman House may change or cease to be, these community relationships with businesses and people that they're going to intersect with in so many other ways, I think are just broadening that net of support that we know is so critical. We are out of time, but I just wanted to give you just a moment. To say whatever you would want to say to a survivor tuning in today about the hope that can be ahead for them.
I would say that you don't have to do this alone. If you're in an abusive relationship, if you're feeling trapped and like you can't get out, there are folks who will help you, and it's so much easier to leave. If you've got someone in your corner to give you some advice, to give you help you do some safety planning, help you come up with a long-term plan. You don't have to do it by yourself. There are advocates at Merryman House and really at our programs across the state that can help you make that next step.
Thank you so much for coming and being with us, and thank you so much for the work you've done many times behind the scenes for over a decade to make life easier for survivors now, but for those that will certainly be to come. So it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.